Hey there, welcome to Screenscape. Today I want to talk about an amazing South Korean fantasy film called Vanishing Time, A Boy Who Returned. Spoilers ahead. At the beginning of the film, a child therapist interviews a girl named Soo-rin. Soo-rin becomes visibly nervous when the therapist sets up a camera to record the session. The therapist requests her to tell her tale from the start. Soo-rin begins by sharing that her mother married Do-kyun some years ago. Shortly after the marriage, her mother passed away, and since then, Soo-rin has been living with Do-kyun. He is assigned to a construction site on a remote island called Hwano, so they have to move there. After her mother's passing, Soo-rin has never truly felt happy. She doesn't talk much and isn't fond of her stepfather. She attends a new school on the island where she has the opportunity to make many friends, but even then she prefers to be alone. Her stepfather has to work overnight as the head of a tunnel construction site. Due to the construction site's explosions, the island's residents are prohibited from entering the area. One night, Soo-rin checks her phone and reads comments on her blog about a wormhole. After her mother's death, Soo-rin wanted to escape from the world, and while researching ways to do that, she started to gain interest in wormholes, supernatural beings, and so on. She talks to people online about such topics. Even using the school's computer, she accidentally leaves her computer open, allowing her classmates to read her comments and make fun of her. On her way home, Soo-rin meets a boy named Sung-min who lives in an orphanage. Sung-min introduces himself and tries to befriend Soo-rin, but she ignores him. The next day during lunch, Soo-rin overhears Sung-min and his friends discussing her blog on the wormhole. Sung-min claims to have entered another dimension after reading it. That day, Sung-min follows her as she walks home. When she confronts him, he claims to believe everything she has written in the blog. Their shared interest in supernatural phenomena brings them closer, and they eventually become friends. Soo-rin creates her own alphabet to communicate with Sung-min in secret. They start using it daily to leave each other notes in Soo-rin's diary. Every day after school, they explore the town in search of ghosts. On one of these expeditions, Sung-min takes Soo-rin to an abandoned wooden house in the forest. As they explore the old house, they engage in lengthy conversations while carving intricate patterns on wax blocks. Soo-rin finds herself gradually falling in love with Sung-min, and one day, without warning, she kisses him, leaving him flustered. One fateful day, Soo-rin stumbles upon Sung-min and three of his friends plotting to sneak into a construction site to watch the explosions. Intrigued, she decides to join them, and they navigate through the woods to avoid being seen by the grown-ups. Upon reaching the site, one of the kids gets scared and retreats home, but the remaining four hide behind a cliff, eagerly anticipating the explosions that never come. Instead, they discover a small cave while wandering through the jungle. Intrigued by the unknown, they go inside one by one. Deep within the cave, they stumble upon a mysterious glowing substance submerged in water. Soo-rin speculates that it might be a meteoroid, while Sung-min bravely dives into the water to retrieve it. Strangely, once outside the tunnel, the glowing stops, and the substance appears like an egg. Taishik, one of the boys, shares a fascinating tale passed down from his grandfather, who spoke of a time goblin residing in a cave on full moon nights. According to the legend, anyone entering the cave would come out much older, but the others remain skeptical as they haven't aged. During their exploration, Soo-rin realizes her hairpin, a gift from her mother, is missing. Concerned, she goes back into the cave, leaving the boys to guard the glowing egg. To her surprise, she finds her hairpin but also discovers the egg back in the water. Confused, she returns outside only to find her friends gone and the egg broken. Searching for them in the forest, Soo-rin loses her way and spends the night stranded. The next day, a police force launches a search operation for the missing kids, and Detective An leads the investigation. Eventually, they find Soo-rin unconscious in the woods, fortunately unharmed. At the hospital, she recounts the whole incident, including the cave and the glowing egg, but neither the detective nor the adults believe her fantastical tale. She takes them to the jungle to prove her story, but she can't find the cave, almost as if it vanished after the full moon night. The situation takes a turn when they discover the lifeless body of one of the missing boys, Jae-wook, buried underground on a distant beach, with asthma being the cause of his death. Now a kidnapping case, the whereabouts of the other two boys remain unknown. As weeks pass without any leads, Soo-rin undergoes a transformation, becoming introverted and withdrawn without Sungmin's presence. Despite her pleas, no one believes her account of events. Then one day, she hears a strange noise outside her house and, following it, encounters a man running into the deep woods. Curiosity getting the better of her, she decides to venture into the forest. After running for a while, Soo-rin suddenly collapses to the ground, causing the man to halt as well. He approaches her with a fascinated gaze, and Soo-rin remains in shock. The man finally speaks, claiming to be Sung-min. At the mention of his name, Soo-rin snaps out of her shock and flees, shedding tears. She finds herself in front of Do-kyun's car and hurriedly relays the encounter to him. The police are notified, and a search for the man, presumed to be the kidnapper, ensues. Detective An interviews Soo-rin about the imposter, and she reveals that he was pretending to be Sung-min. Although the kidnapper eludes capture, the police find Soo-rin's diary, where she and Sung-min used to leave notes for each other. To her surprise, the pages are filled with Sung-min's writings, documenting everything that happened since she went into the cave to retrieve her hairpin. Inside the cave, Soo-rin witnesses Sung-min breaking the egg without waiting for her. Disappointingly, it turns out to be empty. When Soo-rin doesn't return, Sung-min goes back into cave and discovers her frozen in place. Bafflingly, he notices a droplet of water suspended midair. As he leaves the cave, he observes that even the birds are suspended in the sky. The boys venture into town and find everyone, including their families, frozen in time, while they remain unaffected. Initially thrilled by their newfound freedom, the boys revel in indulging their desires, but after a few months they grow bored. They plan to leave the island and explore other cities to see if they truly are the only ones who can move freely. However, they realize the water in the ocean has also frozen, rendering their boat useless. Returning to the present, Soo-rin comprehends that the man who approached her in the woods was indeed Sung-min. Her priority now is to keep the police away from him. She fabricates a lie about seeing no one in the jungle, and the police believe her story, allowing her to continue reading the journal. Months later, the boys reside in a tent inside a mall. Jae-wook's asthma worsens, and his inhaler stops working. Tragically, he passes away in front of his friends, and they bury him on a nearby beach. Like others, Jae-wook's body freezes in time. 5 years pass, and the boys have grown into teenagers. Sung-min had a strong belief that once they turned 20, time would start again. To prepare for that moment, they decided to save up some money from various sources. However, when they reached 20, nothing changed, and time continued to remain frozen. As they lose hope, they retreat to a wooden house in the jungle. Sung-min's frustration reaches a breaking point and he yells, unable to bear the isolation. Noticing the moon's changing shape, he goes looking for Tae-shik but doesn't find him anywhere. He searches for him throughout the island and eventually reaches a cliff. Sung-min finds Tae-shik's clothes on the ground and realizes that his friend has jumped into water. In a final desperate attempt, he leaps after Tae-shik. However, the world abruptly resumes at that moment. Sung-min emerges from the water, captivated by the restored movement of nature. After reading the journal, Soo-rin rushes to the wooden house, finally reuniting with Sung-min. They contemplate sharing their incredible story with the world, though they fear nobody will believe them. Meanwhile, CCTV footage of Sung-min in the woods leads the police to believe he is the kidnapper. Seeking emotional support, he visits Soo-rin at night, fearing he may harm himself due to the pain of living in isolation. The following day, Tae-shik's parents show up at the construction site, holding Do-kyun responsible for their child's disappearance. They are convinced that the explosion at the site caused their son's demise, and believe Soo-rin is fabricating stories to protect her stepfather. Meanwhile, Soo-rin and Sung-min visit the orphanage where Sung-min once lived. Soo-rin opens up to the warden, sharing everything that has happened. She steps outside to call Sung-min, but at that moment, her father forcefully pulls her away. Soo-rin is locked in her room at night, but Sung-min manages to free her. They escape and ponder their next move. Soo-rin remembers seeing a second egg in the cave and suggests using it to return as an adult and clear Sung-min's name. However, Sung-min opposes the idea as he knows the toll of living in isolation and would rather be falsely accused of being a kidnapper than subject Soo-rin to the same experience. Do-kyun notices his daughter is missing and discovers a picture of her and Sung-min on her phone, leading him to suspect they might be at the wooden house. He confronts Sung-min that night, attempting to take Soo-rin back home. In the scuffle, Sung-min knocks Do-kyun out and escapes with Soo-rin. The next day, the police investigate the wooden house and suspect that the kidnapper is posing as Sung-min to manipulate Soo-rin. As news of Soo-rin's disappearance spreads, the police locate the two, initiating a chase. Soo-rin decides to turn herself in to save Sung-min and asks him to meet her at the cave. Detective An tries to convince her that the kidnapper is deceiving her, but she refuses to believe him. Pretending to go to the bathroom, she escapes to the cave and retrieves the glowing egg, intending to give it to Sung-min. However, he refuses to accept it, not wanting her to use it. Feeling responsible for the deaths of his friends, Sung-min contemplates turning himself in. As he flees into the woods, Soo-rin follows, and the police give chase. The pursuit leads to a cliff's edge. In the commotion, an officer accidentally pushes Soo-rin off the cliff, and the detective tries to save her but ends up hanging on the edge as well. Sung-min tries to rescue them, but they all fall back. To save them, Sung-min breaks the egg again, stopping time. Upon waking up on the beach, Soo-rin realizes what Sung-min has done. Although it was just a moment for her, she understands that for Sung-min, it must have been another decade. She returns home, apologizes to her father for everything, and calls him Dad for the first time. The detective arrives to investigate how they survived the fall. Soo-rin remains silent, but he deduces that she had been telling the truth all along. He proposes that she should provide a false statement to the media, stating that the kidnapper manipulated her. This way, those who accuse her of causing harm to her friends, along with the kidnapper, will be proven wrong. Soo-rin finishes sharing her story with the psychiatrist and feels amazed by everything that happened and wants to write a book about her extraordinary experience. A few months later, she's about to move to a new city for high school. Before leaving, she meets the psychiatrist again, who hands her a copy of the book, now published. On her way to the ferry, Soo-rin spots Sung-min through her car window and rushes to meet him, but he's nowhere to be found. However, fate brings them together again on the ferry's deck. The movie ends with Soo-rin and Sung-min staring at each other, leaving their future open to possibilities. Thanks for watching.